I just want to pose a hypothetical to you.
Sure.
Let's just say Comcast created a new TV series, and it just so happened that that competed with a Netflix series very similarly. If these rules go away, how is there not an incredible incentive for Comcast to slow Netflix down coming into my house and make their video, the Comcast video, very robust?
So under that hypothetical, one of the things that's important to remember is that it is a hypothetical, that we don't see evidence of that happening in the marketplace on a widespread level.
There have been some examples of ISPs blocking certain things. The Google Wallet was blocked, Skype was blocked, one Canadian telecom blocked pro-labor sites. I mean, it's not like this doesn't happen.
This past week, Ajit Pai, the former Associate General Counsel at Verizon and the current chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, revealed his plan to dismantle the Obama-era internet regulations known as net neutrality. Now, while you've probably heard the term, the basic idea behind net neutrality is that broadband internet access is treated like a utility, and therefore it can be regulated to ensure that no matter who your internet service provider or ISP is, whether you use Spectrum or AT&T, Verizon or Comcast, the parent company of MSNBC, they can't pick favorites among the content that you want to view, including based on the ISP's relationship to the providers of that content. For example, if Verizon is your internet service provider, they can't restrict your access or slow down your connection to Google just because Verizon owns rival Yahoo and would prefer that you use them for your searches. The idea is to prevent ISPs from blocking access to web content owned by their rivals or that they just don't like, slowing down your access to it or charging tolls to make you pay more for access. Ajit Pai, a Republican appointed to head the FCC by Donald Trump in January, has long opposed these regulations. And now that he's in charge and Republicans have a 3-2 majority on the commission, he's in a position to get his way, but not without objections. And joining me now is one of the people raising such objections, FCC Commissioner Jessica Rosenworcel. And I want to note that we did invite Commissioner Ajit Pai on the show to discuss net neutrality today, but he declined. So, Commissioner, thank you very much for being here. I hope I didn't butcher your last name.
No, you did great. Thank you for having me.
So you wrote a piece, well, thank you, and you wrote a piece, an op-ed saying, I'm on the FCC. Please stop us from killing net neutrality. I'll read a little bit from it from our viewers, and I recommend they read the piece. We'll post it to our social media. This is the open internet experience we all know, and it's a big part of why Americans' internet economy is the envy of the world. Your provider would have the power to choose which voices online to amplify and which to censor. The move could affect everything online, including the connections we make and the communities we create. Commissioner Pai says that there's no evidence that that's ever happened. Is there?
You know, I think he's wrong about that. For starters, we have not had widespread blocking and throttling online because we've had network neutrality protections in place. Nonetheless, we have seen some blocking of internet voice calling and services like Skype and Google Wallet. And we do know that broadband providers can do this technically and have the business incentive to do so. It's these rules that have been in place that have prevented them from doing this on a broader scale.
Yeah. Is it any coincidence? Because when my producers were putting together this segment, they made a list of the people who are for changing the net neutrality rules and those who oppose it. So those who are opposed to net neutrality are AT&T, Verizon, Charter, Comcast, Spectrum, all providers of ISPs, providers of internet services. In favor of net neutrality, content providers, Facebook, Google, Apple, Amazon, Netflix. Is that coincidental, or do you think there's a reason why that split is that way?
Listen, 22 million people have written the Federal Communications Commission. The vast bulk of them have said that they do not want network neutrality to go away. We have a bunch of high-powered lobbyists and lawyers in Washington who are coming to the agency and trying to convince us otherwise. But I think it's really important we listen to the American public.
And there, we all know that Commissioner Pai is formerly the Associate General Counsel of Verizon. His history is well known. He's in favor of things like big mergers and consolidation. He did work at the Justice Department for a while. He worked at Verizon. Do you sense that the reason for this change is a pro-corporate mindset among people that agree with him, as opposed to concern for consumers and competition?
You know, I don't know what's in his head, but I do know this. Our internet economy in the United States is the envy of the world, and it is built on a fundamental notion of openness. And if we take away network neutrality, we really start to gut some of that openness and change things. I mean, your broadband provider will be able to block websites or censor online content. And I can't think of anybody who really thinks that's a good thing.
Yeah, and one of the other pieces that we prepared for this segment is a look at another country that does not have net neutrality. And this is Portugal. So Portugal doesn't have net neutrality. This is an example of sort of a charging sheet that a consumer in Portugal could get for internet service. And as you can see, and it looks really convoluted to people at home, but what it's showing here is that the telecom company, Telco, ADSL, is charging you a monthly fee, $29.95, the equivalent of $29.95 a month. And there are all these little bundles. So if you want to use Google and Yahoo and Flickr and YouTube, you pay an extra $5 premium. If you want the BBC, that's an additional $5. If you want CNN, that's an additional $5, and on and on and on, that they can essentially make you pay more for each little bundle of content that you get. Is that the future that we're looking at? Consumers having to pay more if they want the content that isn't owned by the provider?
Yeah, I'm afraid that without network neutrality, the internet experience we now know, which is open, where you can go and do what you want online, will look a lot more like cable television, where you get your provider choosing which sites you can access, what you can watch, and what you can do.
That is a scary thought. And we really appreciate you being here, Commissioner Jessica Rosenworcel. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, I want to turn now to my panel, Ramesh Srinivasan, UCLA professor, and Ovik Roy, president of the Foundation for Research on Equal Opportunity. And Ovik, I'm going to go to you on this first. Why on earth is it better to have Americans' experience on the internet be more like their experience with cable TV, as the commissioner just said, where the internet service provider chooses the menu of what you get to watch, and they can say no to the content that they don't want you to have or charge you more for it?
Yeah, Joy, what she contended, the opposite is actually going to happen. What these so-called neutrality or regulatory rules have established, and by the way, they're only 2 years old. We had the internet from 1993 to 2015 without these rules, and I think people were pretty happy with the explosion of innovation and competition that emerged out of that experience, which, by the way, came out of Clinton-era regulatory agreements, where the Clinton presidency and the Republican Congress says, hey, let's let the internet be open, let's let competition flourish. And that's what's happened. So here in this situation, with the FCC rules that came out of the Obama administration, they actually suppress competition. You're not forced, like in Portugal, to only go with one internet service provider. You can go to any internet service provider you want, especially in the future as more and more internet service providers are wireless rather than driven by broadband. So what these rules have done is it's increased the cost of starting a new internet service provider, so you can't choose. If you want to pay more to have a service in which YouTube and Google and all those other companies have unlimited, unfettered access to your bandwidth, you can do that, or you can pay less for a service that might be discounted. You opened the segment, Joy, with an example where maybe T-Mobile or Verizon would say, hey, we're going to steer you to Yahoo because we're getting a discount from them and we're passing that on to you in the form of lower fees. Why isn't that good? Why should Google have a monopoly over your search engine? Why should YouTube have a monopoly over video? Let's have more competition. That's why the most powerful internet companies in America, Amazon, Google, Netflix, the ones that you mentioned, they support so-called net neutrality because it enhances their oligopoly status.
Well, you actually misrepresented the example that I gave, because the example I gave was not that they're giving you a discount to use Yahoo instead. They're essentially saying if you don't use Yahoo, we're going to charge you more or make Yahoo really slow. So it's actually the opposite. You misrepresented what I said. But I want to give Ramesh an opportunity. No, it's the opposite of what I said. They're not giving you a discount. They're saying we're going to charge you more if you don't use the service that we own. Let's go
they lose customers then. Who would want to pay more for a service to get things that other people would provide them for free at the same cost? No one would buy that service. So the only way that business model is viable is if they're actually charging you less for your internet service to provide that service. Otherwise, another competitor will come in and do it better.
I want to let Ramesh in, but you are literally giving the opposite of what I said. So let's go to Ramesh.
Okay, well, this is not a setup that actually is going to support competition on any level at all. This is a setup that's going to support large corporations and their lobbyists, as the commissioner just said, because essentially the internet fundamentally represents the democratization of information, right? And the democratization of information is essential to a functioning democracy. So think about what happens if you, for example, Joy, are an independent journalist. You're reporting on some very important stories, but because you're going to get charged a great amount to even put your content online to be accessible at decent bandwidth speeds, it's not going to be available to people. This is blocking off independent journalism, but it's also going to harm in a great manner small businesses, which represent still the majority of new jobs that are created in this country, which have now moved to e-commerce and online retail. And it also represents the majority of types of businesses that are here in this country. So this is not a pro-competition sort of rollback. This is actually anti-competition and pro-oligopoly and pro-lobbyist.
Ovik?
Yeah, the opposite again is true. Independent journalism isn't bandwidth hogging, right? So if you're writing a blog post at the Huffington Post or wherever, that's not actually the thing that's demanding bandwidth. The things that are demanding bandwidth are Netflix, right? It's video content in particular.
So you think Netflix should be able to be charged a toll? That these companies should be able to charge Netflix a toll.
Well, wait, Joy, again, it's the other way around. Remember, if consumers have the choice, like they did before 2015, they can choose an internet service provider that will do what you're supporting that they do and charge more for that. Or they can charge less and have Netflix pay a fee, which again gets passed down to consumers in the form of lower monthly rates for their internet service. That's the way competition works, and we should allow consumers to make that choice. If they want Netflix to be faster and pay a lower fee for that, why not let them? Let that innovation happen. Let that competition happen. Right now, what we've allowed to happen is for Netflix and YouTube and Google to have monopolies, and we shouldn't want that. We should want those industries, those companies to have competition.
I'm going to give Ramesh the final word on that. Because isn't that much like saying if I hike up the price of milk at the store and then I discount it 10%, I've given you a discount? That's what I'm hearing. But anyway, Ramesh, what your witness?
Exactly. I mean, the points that this is sort of a criticism of Netflix and Google. I understand that they're supportive of net neutrality, and part of their business model relies on the long tail, if you will, of net neutrality, meaning all this content that they can make accessible. But independent journalists, independent companies are requiring to share content, often through video, and it's extremely important. I think it just comes down to this fundamental issue. The best parts of the internet, what we know and love about the internet, are the ability to equally access content independent of who creates that content. It's different than TV. It's different than newspapers. It's an open platform and has always been celebrated for that. And we see an increase in ISPs since the net neutrality policies were implemented. So this is extremely important. This is a fundamental treasure that we have to protect with the internet.
Well, I think the people should continue reading up about this. I think there's still a comment period open. I think there have been millions of people who've opposed it, but this vote is going to happen soon. So hopefully everybody at home will read up more about it. Ramesh Srinivasan and Ovik Roy, thank you both for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Joy.
Thank you. And coming up, disturbing new details in the LaDavid Johnson story. That's next. The idea behind net neutrality is that broadband internet access is treated like a utility, and therefore it can be regulated to ensure that no matter who your internet service provider or ISP is, whether you use Spectrum or AT&T, Verizon or Comcast, the parent company of MSNBC, they can't pick favorites among the content that you want to view, including based on the ISP's relationship to the providers of that content. For example, if Verizon is your internet service provider, they can't restrict your access or slow down your connection to Google just because Verizon owns rival Yahoo and would prefer that you use them for your searches. The idea is to prevent ISPs from blocking access to web content owned by their rivals or that they just don't like, slowing down your access to it or charging tolls to make you pay more for access. Ajit Pai, a Republican appointed to head the FCC by Donald Trump in January, has long opposed these regulations. And now that he's in charge and Republicans have a 3-2 majority on the commission, he's in a position to get his.
I just want to pose a hypothetical to you. Sure. Let's just say Comcast created a new TV series, and it just so happened that that competed with a Netflix series very similarly. If these rules go away, how is there not an incredible incentive for Comcast to slow Netflix down coming into my house and make their video, the Comcast video, very robust?
So under that hypothetical, one of the things that's important to remember is that it is a hypothetical, that we don't see evidence of that happening in the marketplace on a widespread level.
There have been some examples of ISPs blocking certain things. The Google Wallet was blocked, Skype was blocked, one Canadian telecom blocked pro-labor sites. I mean, it's not like this doesn't happen.
This past week, Ajit Pai, the former Associate General Counsel at Verizon and the current chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, revealed his plan to dismantle the Obama-era internet regulations known as net neutrality. Now, while you've probably heard the term the basic way, but not without objections. And joining me now is one of the people raising such objections, FCC Commissioner Jessica Rosenworcel. And I want to note that we did invite Commissioner Ajit Pai on the show to discuss net neutrality today, but he declined. So, Commissioner, thank you very much for being here. I hope I didn't butcher your last name.
No, you did great. Thank you for having me.
So you wrote a piece, well, thank you, and you wrote a piece, an op-ed saying, I'm on the FCC. Please stop us from killing net neutrality. I'll read a little bit from it from our viewers, and I recommend they read the piece. We'll post it to our social media.